In this video, I want to highlight something I think is useful to understand around psychedelics and therapists and healers and people in general. So there are some nice YouTube videos about the use of the San Pedro cactus that, what is this called? Well, this is called hachumawasi.com. And it's a place in, I think it's Peru, where someone has taken on the discipline of providing these services from the Ukraine. And in general, I think there's some nice, good educational videos. This is from Sergey. And if you look at the website, because there's a very wide range of costs of these types of things, from anywhere from $100 to $18,000, a week or a ceremony, and so it's an important part. And so if you go through this site to understand the cost, if you go through this site in detail, you find there's zero information about costs from, about accommodation, and there's zero conversation about costs for any of the ceremonies. This is Sergey here. And there's lots of conversation about everything other than cost. And so it's a striking omission. If we were to, turn to Amazon or any other online place, cost is a pretty prominent feature of an online purchase of any kind. And if we go to other, if we type in ayahuasca retreat, well, this is one in the US. And it's not too hard to find the cost. It's not the main thing, and it shouldn't be the main thing. But the costs are mentioned both for accommodation and for ceremony, and I think that's appropriate. One approach is to say that these are priceless experiences, which of course they are, but the facilitators, in this case, I've forgotten his name, but anyway, is placing a cost on the accommodation and the ceremony. And I turn to frequently asked questions. Where is it? We couldn't find anything there. Chuma, Alaska. Under resources, we found frequently asked questions. Now, there isn't a single person that I know that would not want to know what the cost is. And so you have a long list of great questions, everything except the cost. There's even payment cancellation and refund policy without saying the amount that's being canceled or refunded. And so my first question in a situation like this is, why is the cost being avoided? In other words, they're saying this is what we will provide you, but we're not saying here's what you have to give us, right? It's an exchange of energy. This is not free. So why list everything that we will give to you, but nothing about what you have to give to us? So that's pretty obvious. But so I asked, Sergey, one, why don't they list the price? And two, what is the price? And three, if my wife could be here without having to attend a ceremony if she didn't want to. And so we have a deepening of the defense. Now, I would say that the omission of price is an incredibly conscious choice. So you have a withholding of useful information that requires the person writing to ask about it. Whatever you don't share, that is important in the exchange of energy, the other person has to ask about. So what Sergey is saying is, please ask us about the price, because that's the only way we're going to tell you. But then he has a defense ready once anyone asks about the price. So we are not a travel agency. That's accurate, but irrelevant. If pricing is the first question you have in mind while visiting our website, now that's a bunch of assumptions, right? Because it wasn't the first question. I watched a video, I read through numerous things, I read through all the other questions. This is the last question, but it is the only one that Sergey is actively withholding, right? So it is the first question or the first answer that Sergey is hiding. So it must be the first question that anyone asks. The other stuff is covered. Then if you ask the question that we're not going to tell you the answer for, you're not the right person for us. So here we have some transposing psychology. In other words, if they volunteer the pricing, there will be a variety of people that say, that's too much, that's not the right accommodation for us. But we're flipping that in Sergey's world, where anyone who asks about this or who is concerned about money is not the right one for them. And then we're doing a comparison, meaning Sergey is comparing my email to other people. It is rare. Now this is focused on normalcy, right? Now anyone doing psychedelics is not normal. They're healthy, they're intelligent, they're just not normal. But rarity does not mean anything. It is rare for people to offer online services and not share their price. But the rarity is because it's convenient. It's wasting Sergey and my time to have to ask about it. And he also has a judgment. Now, why would he ignore someone's email if they ask about the price? So I'm not going to tell you what the price is, so you have to ask. And if you ask, we will ignore it. This is a good, by the way, if we look at the following prices per person. This is a great explanation. There's nothing wrong with these prices. They're clear, they're useful, they should be on the website to save everyone time. There's a great thing. But if you have to ask for this information, you may have it be ignored. Now, the reason to ignore something is if you criticize the other person, right? Because if we go up to his last email, Political correctness has never been my strength. I prefer straight talk instead. If you can't handle my words, you won't be able to handle my medicine and my experience, for we are one. Now, I actually may have misread this. He could be saying that he and I are one. That's what I thought, because there's a lot in transcendent experience. There's a lot of focus on the unity between, human beings. But he could be saying that his words and the San Pedro cactus are one. I would question that, because his words and the medicine of San Pedro are not one. It's not his medicine. It's, the real medicine is a transcendent experience with the other. It's his cactus, but that's not the medicine. The cactus just disables parts of the brain so that a transcendent experience can come through. And he's questioning why my wife might not want to work with the medicine. That was the other thing. Could she come and not take the medicine? The English is irrelevant. He's Ukrainian. We're speaking in my language, not his, so it's nice that he's learned English. But is she afraid or rejected as a valid tool for healing and growth? I need to hear an answer to this question to make an exception for her. Meaning, no one's welcome unless they're doing, the ceremony. There will be no additional cost if she stays without doing so. If her energy is right. If her energy is wrong, according to Sergei, then there will be a cost, apparently, or she will have to leave. And I just want to, highlight the fact. So we're going to go through this sequentially. So, I just pointed this out to Sergei. We're not a traveler. So I'm pointing this out, that, you have to ask the question. Because he's done such a thorough job of answering the other questions, this is pretty much the main question. And I point out that he's assuming that this is all anyone cares about. And then I go into another thing that concerned me, because if you go back to his site, while there is no way to email directly, you have to fill out a contact form. There is an invitation to fill out the information form, right? Now, this information form is to apply for Sergei's thing. Now, you're asked, before knowing the cost, to apply, what is your intention for the retreat? What previous experience you have with psychedelics? Some people could write 10 pages on this. I could write 100 pages, and I have, about this. Physical condition, hospitalized, any mental, including schizophrenia. In other words, deep into your mind, list all medications. Are you comfortable sharing people you do not know? This, that. Addictions. So we're looking at trauma and shame. Describe your spiritual path. Please describe concerns and fears. You're asked to send to a complete, I wouldn't say a complete stranger, but you're asked to send to someone you've never met all of this information. But Sergei is not sharing all of this information with you. there's a good amount of it. And he is encouraging reading his book. I think that's a good idea. I think that's a good filter. But let's just say, how would you feel if you fill this all out and you need to do, if you're dealing with anything heavy, you probably need to spend about a month doing some work, and you don't want the pressure of you're going to run out of money and have to, in an unintegrated state, re-enter, the general culture. And so you're going to, I would say that most of the global population is going to have difficulty with these prices. So $3,000 a month is more than most of the global population can spend. So what if your budget is $1,500 a month or $2,500 a month? What's being set up here is, so you've gone all the way into this. This connects you with deep feelings. If you then learn that it's slightly out of your budget, you're in either a begging situation, which Sergey may respond to, meaning there's plenty of people that want to be begged, and if you beg them, then they will say, okay, I will make an exception for you. But they're wanting to be in a vertical position, and that's what I would say is one of the subtexts of my interaction with Sergey, is he wants to be in a superior position. I know what's best. I want all the information. I'm not going to give you all the information. I mean, hell, all we're asking is to know what it costs. He wants to know what's your history with schizophrenia, before considering this. And, that's an imbalance. It creates an imbalance of power. It's not good. Now, so, I see that. It makes me uncomfortable. Why is the cost being, pushed? I'm also uncomfortable with how my wife is going to feel. I'm in the middle of a session. Sergey doesn't like her energy. So what? We split up as a couple. We don't get a refund because Sergey doesn't like her energy. It's all an imbalance of power. I'm going to take you in an altered state. You're going to do it this way. You're going to tell me this, but I'm not going to tell you the information. I have judgments of you, but you shouldn't have judgments of me because other people are grateful. Now, to this, I'll just leave this here so you can read it, but I point out that pressuring anyone to do anything doesn't tend to work well. It hasn't worked well for me. I don't think it's a good policy around psychedelics. And so, my approach would be to let my wife do what she wanted to do. But she would be going to this place because I want to go and we want to stay together. And so anyway, I share reasons why I think it's appropriate. I think it's healthy in a balance of relationship for Sergey to disclose prices before he asks people to share the most intimate information of their lives. Meaning, if you've ever done psychedelics, you know that that's some of the most intimate information in your life. In a shame-based culture around mental illness, you know that that's very intimate. And that's a lot of writing to do for Sergey, only to find that it's out of your budget, right? So, so that's my point to Sergey. Now, Sergey is avoiding all of this, meaning I've shared my reasons for this and, what I see. I won't change a thing because you think I should. that's not actually the question. The question is, does he think he should? Now, I would doubt that Sergey's personality type would respond well to his own website. Because if Sergey needs to be in control, and I have Sergey's personality type, I know I much prefer to be in control. But I feel like I prefer people to know what things cost. I don't think Sergey would share all of his life history to a stranger without knowing the cost. Political correctness is not the issue. There's nothing that I'm saying is correct or incorrect. It's just, does it work? Meaning, if you take 1,000 people and you pressure them into taking psychedelics when they don't want to, and you take another 1,000 people and you say, it's available, you can take it if you want to, when you want to, where you want to, at an appropriate dose, once you have the information. We're just going to create a safe space for your choice. The 1,000 people that freely choose it are going to end up getting more benefit and having less side effects than the 1,000 people who are pressured into it. That is what the data says. It's not what I think. It's just the way the world works. Now, Sergey is ironically proving that here. He's responding badly because I think he should change his pricing policy for these reasons. Now, what he's responding to is, no one's going to tell me what to do. I'm not. I'm explaining the reasons. And if he cares about the statistics, then he will change them on his own. If it's the same in a restaurant. If you learn that adding arsenic to your drink increases the likelihood of death by 50%, and you say you think it's based on that, you think it's a good idea for them not to add arsenic to the drink. If they say no one's going to tell me what to do, that's not the point. The point is, do you want to kill half of your customers? In this sense, we're not dealing with death, we're just dealing with emotional discomfort. And if you can't handle my words, this is another kind of technique of one-upmanship in medicine and healing and therapies of all time, throughout time. If this is not something you want to do in this way, well, then you can't handle it. And there's part of the chauvinism, like a real man, could handle these things. So the appropriate thing is for real men to take triple doses, to do 3 ceremonies, to not, bring any of this up. What is this? If you can't handle my words. So there's the word can't. If you don't like my words, then you've got a little bit more of a question of, in other words, if I don't like how Sergey is running his website, etc., I may not choose to have the most vulnerable experience of my life with Sergey. I think that's an appropriate, dynamic. But there's no validation here. In other words, what I've learned from this interaction is that if anything Sergey doesn't work for me, what I'm going to hear from Sergey is exactly what I am hearing from Sergey. Hundreds of people have written him letters. He does things the way he's doing. Nobody's going to tell him what to do. Well, that's not what you want in a suggestible state when you are depending on someone psychologically and physically. You want someone to understand where you're coming from, understand their impact, and care about changing it. That's what you want. You don't want someone saying, get lost if the way that I do it doesn't work for you, because you can't get lost while you're high on a psychedelic journey. And this is something that I learned from a tremendously abusive therapist who pushed a high dose of psychedelics and then pushed around the session to avoid dealing with any of his same stuff. So what I'm learning here is that Sergey is defensive and is more interested in holding, to his policies than on how it affects others. And we'll just say that, that I've received hundreds of letters, etc. Now, what that says is that all of the Wachuma healings that Sergey has done has not changed his defensiveness in this area. And I think that's the key thing that I think is useful to understand with, whether it's teachers or therapists or whatever, is endless amounts of therapists have horrible marriages. Endless amounts of psychedelic shamans, have horrible personal relationships, which means that if your goal is to be less defensive and blah, 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 you may have to just learn that on your own, because a plant, a psychedelic, is not necessarily certainly not going to shift that. Or Sergey would not be defending this. I would say that Sergey has some stuff around money, probably a wound around being told that his ceremonies are too much. And because of that, he's taken it off his website and is, saying that people doing that, or don't have their focus in the right place. And because of that wound, and that wound not being healed, meaning Sergey's ceremonies are very good for some people, and you can see that in the videos. But they haven't healed Sergey's hurt around that, or this wouldn't be an issue. And they haven't healed my hurt around this, meaning if you'll listen carefully, I'm picky and defensive, and I mention that here, since I'm picky about the dynamic with the space holder, and you are picky about your clients, and I don't seem to be up to your standards of judgment. You are not, and you are not up to mine. It does not seem like a good relationship to put more weight on. I think this is really important. If you're having little issues over, website policy, that speaks to a sensitivity. And what it's saying is, Sergey cannot be sensitive to my pickiness. And the last thing that I want to do when I'm dealing deep in a psychedelic journey is have to be sensitive to a therapist's pickiness and their reactivity. Sergey is very reactive and assumptive in this terrain. And I don't want to deal with that, and I don't think that someone in a psychedelic session should have to deal with that. Now, the people who I think have no issue and no friction with Sergey don't have this pickiness, don't have this fear, don't have this issue. So it's the combination of my concern and pickiness and Sergey's concern and pickiness that is bringing this up. But it's easy, a lot of the videos that you'll see in psychedelic journeys are during or right after a session. And so in Sergey's YouTube videos, you'll find delighted people talking about this changing their life forever. But I don't think there's any question that if Sergey had a more receptive awareness and responsiveness to what's being said, that his business would be better, that his services would be better, and that people would have a better experience with him, including his family. That's a rational assumption. And it's also a rational assumption that if the plant could facilitate that with Sergey, it would. And so there are limits. And I would, say that, I've thought of going into this realm professionally, and there's certainly a strong draw, but my biggest caution is I know that I'm not up to my own standards, meaning I am also reactive and hurt about various things, and psychedelics has not been able to heal me of any of that deep hurt and reactivity. And so, that this, I think, is useful to understand.